All right, true believers, welcome to the freedom to draw unsolved mysteries. Today's case is an unexplained death. Join me, your host, John Krupa. We're going to explore an unexplained death from Clarksville, Tennessee, guys. Recently, I had visited Nashville, Clarksville, and Guthrie, Kentucky. And while I was there, I found out some crazy cases, and we can fall down these rabbit holes together on today's episode of the Freedom to Draw Unsolved Mysteries. Okay, welcome, guys. This is your host, John Krupa. Today's case on November 20th, which is National Absurd Day, is the case of Susan Lund. We're going to draw her and tell you about her at the same time. And we're also going to listen to the talking heads because I think they fit on National Absurd Day. It's basically a day for you to stop making sense. And those of you that know Talking Heads, the band, they stopped making sense a long time ago. So we're going to have them on in the background as we explore Susan Lund's case and we draw her at the same time. What happened to Susan Lund? Family revisits mystery 30 years after Clarksville woman's disappearance and death. Clarksville, Tennessee. It's like standing in a crowd of people and waiting for her to call out your name. Anne Marie Miley said for almost 3 decades, Miley had been waiting and listening for her sister, Susan Lund, to call her name. If you've driven down College Street towards downtown recently or ventured down the 41A bypass, you may have seen a billboard on the side of the road with a woman's face and large text asking what happened to Susan Lund. These billboards are 2 of 6 put up in Clarksville to rally the community for answers that are now over 30 years old. And this is that's the billboard you're going to see if you go to Tennessee, Clarksville. I've been there just recently and I did see one of the billboards. They're all over the place. The disappearance. It was Christmas Eve, 1992, and seemingly normal day was about to turn into an evening that would change the Lund family forever. At 7:30, Susan Lund, who was around 3 months pregnant, left her home at Harrier Court, just off of Jack Miller Boulevard, on foot to go buy some groceries, according to the newspaper archives of Clarksville. From the time her daughter Crystal Lund, who was 4 years old, begged her mom to go to the store with her, but she was told no. She told Clarksville newspaper Now. But the grocery store had closed early on Christmas Eve, and Susan never returned. Now that grocery store that she went to, I learned that it was 8 miles away. And Susan was pregnant at the time. That's a heck of a long time to walk. That's a 16-mile round trip. So you ask, why are you telling me that? It's not crazy to think that she hitched a ride, because what pregnant woman is going to walk 16 miles round trip? I just don't see it happening. She probably hitched a ride because it was safe, people thought, to do that back then. Back then, a lot of people hitched rides. I think I even did it back in the 90s, or late 90s. And the store was open. She did make it to the store because she made a phone call to her sister and they talked, and she seemed like she was excited about their plans for the Christmas holidays. So she made it from the first hitchhike. I just doubt, that she walked all that way. She probably hitchhiked the first time, and then she was like, well, on my way back, I'll just hitchhike again. It worked the first time, and I didn't get in trouble, so I'll do it on the way back too. I don't want to walk, and it's cold, and I'm pregnant. I shouldn't be walking, so that's probably what happened. And the way back is where she ran into trouble. The person that gave her the ride probably in the first two was probably a good Samaritan. The second one most likely was not. Crystal, now 35, recalled getting up early the next morning with her brother and getting into the Christmas presents, not knowing that their mother hadn't come home. Their father, Paul Lund, come down the stairs, upset at the children that they had already gotten into the presents. That's when everyone realized something was wrong, and Paul Lund called the police to report his wife missing. And a side note is that Paul Lund died not too long before they actually identified Susan Lund's remains that they found. We'll get to that in a bit. But he did die. Susan Lund remained missing for 29 years, but how she died remains a mystery to this day. The search. At the time, spouse Paul Lund was a soldier assigned to the 311th Military Intelligence Battalion. The couple had lived in Clarksville, Tennessee for only around 2 or 3 months at the time of Susan's disappearance, and a police report stated she may have been upset over their financial situation. Laura Norton, author of Lay Them to Rest, a book about identifying Susan Lund, told Clarksville Now newspaper that the Lund family didn't have a car and had to rely on friends to take them on grocery store runs and to take Paul to work on Fort Campbell. She also didn't have a telephone. That was another reason why she went to the grocery store. She wanted to use the payphone to call her sister. So it was not only to get stuff from the grocery store, it was also to use the payphone. But now I believe the grocery store was closed, so she went all that way out there for nothing. But she did make the phone call because the phone records prove it. After 2 weeks of searching, CPD abandoned their search for Susan because they said there were multiple sightings of her in Hopkinsville, Kentucky. but they kept her listed as a missing person. 2 months after her disappearance, Paul alleged that his wife was kidnapped, and he said the night she went missing, Susan was carrying her checkbook but had not written out any checks. Now you're thinking, Tennessee, is that really close to Kentucky? They cited her in Kentucky, but from Clarksville, Kentucky's not that far away. It's only about 13 miles when you start heading into Kentucky. So, yeah, it's believable that she was sighted near Kentucky. I've been to Tennessee and Kentucky. Perhaps the strongest lead that police investigators found in the months that followed Susan's disappearance was a woman in Alabama claiming to be Susan Lund. According to the Leaf Chronicle article on August 13th, 1993, she recently talked with an Alabama state trooper in the town where she now apparently lives. At the time, the woman told TBI agent Jeff Puckett that she was the woman reported missing and she did not want to be bothered. And this, in my opinion, was a huge blunder. They believed this. Our family eventually went to Alabama to confirm this woman's identity. Miley, Susan's sister, told Clarksville Now the police, went there and decided on their own that she was Susan. My parents decided they wanted to go there and see for themselves if it was Susan, and they did, and it wasn't her. So police just blundered on purpose or on accident, I don't know. But it was a blunder, bonehead move, regardless. Actually believing someone, it could have been a prank call for all they knew. Remains identified on January 27th, 1993. 1 month after Susan went missing, 2 young girls found the head of a white woman on the side of a wooded roadway in Wayne Fitzgerald State Park near Benton, Illinois, an almost 3-hour drive northwest of Clarksville. The remains were labeled the Ina Jane Doe, and the woman's identity was unknown for 29 years. They called her Ina Jane Doe because that was the nearest town where they found the head. Ina, Illinois was the nearest town. And that's why they called it Ina Jane Doe. In February of 2021, Dr. Amy Michael approached Jefferson County Sheriff's Office in Illinois to offer a re-examination of the remains, being updated with updated forensic methods. With Norton collaborating on the reanalysis, a DNA profile was provided to Redgrave Genealogy Company, who then uploaded the data file to GEDmatch in February 2022. Redgrave's genealogy team arrived at a potential match within a day, then found out that Lund had been reported missing with no dated death. The potential ID was passed to law enforcement, who then followed up with family members of Susan Lund. A DNA sample was provided by a sibling for direct comparison. Around the time that Susan was identified, Crystal learned that several campers and hikers who were at Wayne Fitzgerald State Park during the time frame that the remains were discovered reported seeing a headless body in the lake. To her knowledge, no one has followed up on these reports and searched the water. Now, before they identified Susan Lund, they thought that this Ina Jane Doe was a girl by the name of Gina Clark. That's a crazy story too. Maybe we'll do a episode of Gina Clark, but they thought it was Gina Clark, the Ina Jane Doe, but it turned out to be Susan Lund. A daughter's doubt. Paul passed away February 2020, 2 years before Susan's remains were identified, leaving Crystal with many unanswered questions. I don't want to blame my dad, but there are stories about my dad and how he treated my mom, and some things don't make sense to me, Crystal told the newspaper, like why my grandmother and my uncle came so fast and why we all got brand new bed sheets and blankets. Today is Absurd Day, and we're listening to Talking Heads, because they don't really make sense, and they made a career of it. A couple of months after the mother's disappearance, Crystal said they moved to Virginia. Not long after their move, Paul left. Crystal said she could recall her dad wasn't around much, which lines up with initial news reports stating that Paul was slated to go to Korea. With their mom and dad gone, the Lund children went to live with their paternal grandparents. Now, they thought that their mother just abandoned them between the years of the 90s, the 2000s, 2010s, not till 2020, when they found the head. They finally got news that their mother did not abandon them, and it more seems like foul play. People believed that lady's phone call. I think she was just a mental case. Crystal said her paternal grandmother wasn't the biggest fan of Susan, and she told her horrible things about her mother that she didn't believe. They would tell me that she was with another man, Crystal said. They would say things like she allowed him to molest you. Crystal said, I don't remember any of that. She recalled that one time her dad told her out that the way she was treated was because she reminded them so much of her mom. As a kid, I remember thinking every woman with red hair was my mom. I was with my cousin at a pool one time, and I remember walking up to her and asking, hey, are you my mom? I was determined to find her. Determination eventually turned to anger at missing her mom. I had a lot of bitterness and anger towards her when I was in my teenage years, Crystal said. I went through moments when I missed her and I wanted to find her, but I still had a lot of anger because I thought she'd just up and left. When Crystal was a teenager, her much older cousin told her she had seen Paul choke Susan and slam her on the hood of the car out of anger. When Susan's remains were identified, she contacted this same cousin again to inform him, and he told her the exact same story. According to Crystal, during Paul's military service, he was a heavy alcoholic. Who was Susan Lund? Miley told Clarksville Now newspapers that her sister loved animals ever since she was a little girl. She was always bringing home a stray puppy now and then. Puppy or kitten. Miley said she would come home with the most flea-bitten dog. Susan had found so many animals that their parents told her to stop as they couldn't afford to take on so many pets. Crystal said one of her earliest and perhaps fondest memories of her mother was when Susan rescued a kitten and gave it to her. From what I heard, my mom was a tomboy, didn't care about getting dirty. I guess Crystal laughs. She crawled under the dirty shed and got me my first kitten, and we named her Baby. So this may provide some insight into the way Susan Lund lived her life. I think she wasn't afraid to take risks, and a risk taker will often hitchhike, because they have faith in humanity. And as sometimes you should have faith in humanity, but sometimes you shouldn't. And I believe this case probably shouldn't have had faith in humanity. It ended up getting her in some kind of foul play. Crystal also remembered that her mom liked taking the kids on walks too, to get ice cream and play with other military children in the neighborhood. After Susan Lund disappeared, whenever they were visitors over, Crystal would point out the picture of her mother and say, "She'll be back soon." That day never came. Now, it's also interesting to note that I believe in Illinois, at a big wheeler truck stop, it was called, at the I-57 and Route 15 intersection, they saw in a restroom, somebody reported graffiti, disturbing graffiti. It said as follows: serial killer 393, which may mean March of 93. Now remember, Susan went missing in 92. 19 and counting. 5 men, 12 women, 2 children, 8 black, 8 white, 3 Hispanic. Don't worry, I'll get to the rest. And that's a really creepy graffiti. And if it was just somebody with a sick sense of humor, maybe. But it's interesting to note that that was around the same timeline as when this woman disappeared. And here's the timeline surrounding Susan's disappearance as we listen to Psycho Killer, the Talking Heads. The December 24th, 1992, Susan Lund disappears during a trip to the grocery store. January 8th, 1993. Clarksville Police Department ends active search. January 27th, 1993. Remains of Ina Jane Doe discovered at Wayne Fitzgerald State Park. February 24th, 1993. Paul Lund alleges his wife has been kidnapped. June 1993, Susan's due date for her fourth child. August 13th, 1993, Alabama woman claims to be Susan Lund. Later that year, family visits and determined she was not Susan Lund. February 3rd, 2020, Paul Lund dies, her husband. February 3rd, 2022, samples of Ina Jane Doe remains re-examined using new DNA testing. March 6, 2022, the Ina Jane Doe confirmed to be Susan Lund. Now there is a $10,000 reward for information on the death of Susan Lund. Any tips regarding the case should be directed to either the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office in Illinois, CPD Cold Case Detective Keenan Carlton at 931-648-0656, extension 5172, or call 618-242-847-TIPS. And here it is again if you missed it. You can read it. There's the numbers, guys. And I don't really care if you subscribe, but you gotta share this. This is important that this show gets to as many people as we can. We are trying to find this woman's killer, and it is very important that you share this. I don't care if you subscribe. I don't care if you watch the whole video, but you gotta share this so other people can watch it. Maybe someone will know something. Guys, that does it for this episode of the Freedom to Draw Unsolved Mysteries. I'm your host, John Krupa. And until next time, peace out, true believers.